Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Anderson Silva to defeat Daiju Takase. And I'm here to talk about the main event for UFC on ESPN 46. I finally wrote down the fucking title. Kai Kara-France versus Amir Albazi. Both these guys are headlining their first event here, which is pretty cool. Kai Kara-France has already had some high-profile fights, high stakes against Brandon Moreno, fighting for the interim title, I think. But here they're both in the main event for the first time. That's pretty cool. Amir Albazi, this is easily his biggest fight. You can't say that for Kai Kara-France, but for Albazi, this is his biggest fight here, and this will certainly be the most pressure he's under. But he seems to be answering every question. I really like Albazi as a fighter. Everything I wanted to see from him coming into that Alessandro Costa fight, he showed me. That was, if you were to tell me or ask me, what's the one result that would, increase or whatever, increase his stock or increase your respect for Amir Albazi in this fight, I'd say a third round knockout over Alessandro Costa. Much more than anything else. Submission, decision, round one, round two, third round knockout. And that's what he showed me. And he got it in emphatic fashion, caught him with a big uppercut or whatever, weird right hand punch. But right on the noggin, followed up a ground and pound, hammer fist, and knocked him out. Just an incredible finish. Albazi looked really technical deep into that fight. And it was not an easy fight either. It wasn't like it was a cakewalk. And he showed power, of course, too. So, really cool win for Albazi. And I got to admit, I am pretty high on him. If I can give you the fucking spoiler here in the first 2 minutes. I'm picking Albazi to win. I do think Albazi on the ground certainly has Kai Kara-France beaten. But on the feet, it's close. I'd say Kai Kara-France should be the better striker, but Amir Albazi, I think, certainly hits harder. He's shown to be a pretty damn good striker himself, really come into his own. And I also think he's more powerful. Definitely has the harder overhand right, so to speak. And I always say overhand right, but that implies that his left hook is probably more powerful too. But Kai Kara-France, he's the faster fighter. He's always a smaller guy, but smaller and faster and more accurate and with being smaller and not so bricked up, as the kids say, he can throw the volume. So Kai Kara-France has distinct advantages, the same ones in this fight on the feet that he has in just about every other fight. Amir Albazi, let's get into it. 16-1. First, let me give you their stats. 29 years old, Albazi. Kai Kara-France is 30. Albazi's a little bigger, has 1 inch of height, 2 inches of reach. And now to their records. 16-1 for Albazi. 16 wins. He's got 5 by knockout, 9 by submission, 2 by decision. And the 1 loss is by decision in the LFA or whatever. I don't know. I watched the fight. I've seen the fight a few times. But he lost to Jose Shorty Torres. Really good fighter who came into the UFC for a cup of coffee. But for whatever reason, things didn't pan out. He was 1-1, I believe. So it is what it is. But either way, Shorty Torres got the better of him on the feet, and I've got to be honest, it's precisely the kind of fight that I think Kai Kara-France could fight and beat him. It's precisely the blueprint he's going to be trying to follow. It was a good, close fight, but Jose Shorty Torres knocked him down a few times. Weird knockdowns, momentum, getting jabbed, hit with a stiff jab. It wasn't like he was knocked senseless. And then Albazi came back, had a strong round 2, took his back, was working well. But then in round 3, he was the one losing the wrestling battle. And Shorty Torres just got the better of him, had the better gas tank, was more comfortable in that moment. But since then, Albazi, he's looked incredible. In the UFC, he's got beautiful submission wins, a triangle over Malcolm Gordon, a rear naked choke over Francisco Figueiredo, and a decision victory over Zhalgas Zhumagulov, who's very tough to dominate. And as I broke down in his last fight, which, again, I don't think took place a few weeks ago, it was canceled, but he was robbed in just about every decision but the Albazi fight. Albazi clearly won that fight, and that was another example of the fight going the opposite way I expected it to go. I thought Zhalgas would be the one taming the newcomer, maybe giving up round one and winning rounds 2 and 3, and instead it was the exact opposite. So I trust Albazi's cardio. I really do, even though he's never been 5 rounds. Neither has Kai France, actually, but he's been scheduled to fight 5 rounds. Actually, maybe Albazi has too. What the fuck do I know? But either way, neither guy's been to even the 4th round. But Albazi, being the guy here in his first fight scheduled for 5 rounds in the UFC, I trust he can go 5 hard rounds. The way he's looked in round 3, especially in that Alessandro Costa fight, but also in the Jalga Zhumagula fight. I think he's got distinct advantages on the ground, Albazi. I like his wrestling, which is good enough to get him to the ground, but his jiu-jitsu is where he shines. He's got those submissions, and even before he got to the UFC, he's got plenty of other subs, 9 submission victories in his 16 wins, but they all come by Kimura or rear naked choke early on. So he's always been a top game fighter, unless he hit those Kimuras from the guard. What the fuck do I know? But from what I've seen, he is a top game fighter, Albazi. That's where he's going to do his best, and that's where Kai France doesn't want to be. Kai France is a guy who has dealt with excellent grapplers in great fashion and in poor fashion as well. Let's get into it. He's got 10 losses, 24-10 record. The 10 losses come 3 by knockout, 3 by submission, 4 by decision. He lost twice by knockout, really TKO, very early in his career, fights 2 and 3, fighting one guy who was twice his size. And in my opinion, he kind of crumbled in both fights. The second loss in the third fight actually happened in the 3rd round after he was dominating. But he just kind of crumbled, and it wasn't a good sign, to be honest, as a fighter. But that's the type of thing where, proving yourself over the course of the next decade can make that a fluke. And that's how I look at those fights. I don't look at it like he's got any give in him if he's going to get hit with a hard shot. I think you have to knock him out, knock him silly, or knock his body silly, like Brandon Moreno did, and which is really just a knockout, and taking him out of the fight. Kai France, he was young, overmatched, outgunned, outmuscled, and those were learning lessons. And he also has been submitted, and I should mention the one other knockout comes against Brandon Moreno in his most recent loss. Body kick, round 3, championship level, Brandon Moreno. So that's the only one that's really relevant. His 3 submission losses, he lost twice, 8 or 9 years ago, to some really good submission artists with deep records, pretty good guys. But his only real loss in the last 10 years or so has been to Brandon Royval. And if you remember that fight, it was a fucking wild one. Knockdowns and submissions, and Royval ended up getting him with a guillotine in round 2, which was just excellent. That was Brandon Royval's 2nd fight in the UFC, I think, too, after beating Tim Elliott, who's fighting earlier this night. But, that's the one loss. Brandon Moreno, even though he's been submitted by Alexandra Pantoja, I'd say he's still probably the most dangerous submission artist in the division. He's like their Charles Oliveira. He can be submitted, but he could submit anybody. So, no shame in that being your one submission loss over the last few years. But it did happen, and, whatever. It showed he can still be submitted. And Albazi, if he's as good as I expect him to be, he could get it done via submission. On the ground, Kai France, he's dealt with some really good wrestlers. Nobody better than Askar Askarov, the way he won that fight. That was just a pleasant surprise, to be honest, seeing him win that fight. Taking that guy apart, which, took some incredible scrambling and really good defensive wrestling. He was controlled and taken down early, but he was the fresher fighter and the better fighter down the stretch. And that was kind of similar to the Jose Shorty Torres fight. Only Kai France didn't take him down in round 3. But Kai France definitely has dealt with some really good grapplers. Rogerio Bontorin got him down and was controlling him, dominating him in round 1. And then at the end of round 1, Kai France got up, scrambled out, and cracked him with a punch after like a few seconds on the feet and knocked him dead. So he's dealt with some really good wrestlers. And I'm sure if he wins, it's not going to look too different from those fights. Maybe not a knockout like he got over Bontarine. I think if he was to get Albazi out of there, it would be a little later in the fight. But I think in general, they'll look similar, with him looking worse early on, but then taking over and just winning the volume battle and the takedown defense, keeping him in the fight. And he pulls ahead. But I'm picking Albazi. I think Albazi's going to win this fight. I just trust him more. I've seen him knock down, sure, even though they weren't the most crisp knockdowns, but I trust him more. His health as a fighter. I really like the upside with him. That's what the pick is and the bet is. It's a bet on the upside. Albazi, he's got a more distinct advantage on the ground than Kai Kara-France does on the feet. Because to be honest, on the feet with the power and the chin and everything else and the body, I trust Albazi. He's very much in the striking battle. He's got the harder punch, and he's got pretty good cardio. He can fight well on his feet for 15 minutes, as we saw, getting that third round knockout over Costa. And I think he wins this with wrestling. I think he wins it with grappling, I should say, but it's going to take wrestling to get him there. I think he's got the wrestling to get Kai Kara-France down. I trust him as an athlete, and I think, striking well at range and a well-timed takedown will lead to success in this fight. It may not pan out early on, but I don't think Albazi's the guy that's going to melt when plan A doesn't work. I think he's going to be very much in this fight. He's got a lot of experience already, even if it's not nearly as valuable as Kai Kara-France's experience, but he's still got a lot of valuable experience, and he's answering every question. So I'm picking Albazi. I think he's just got more ways to win. I could see him winning by TKO, could certainly see him winning by submission, and I could even see him winning by decision, although I think that'd be less likely, because I do think he's not going to, there's a chance he takes him down for 5 rounds straight and dominates, but I don't envision a 50-45 decision. I think if Albazi was to win a decision, it would be a scrappy war. But still, he hasn't shown any signs of fading. He has a lot of intangibles. I like him as a fighter. And Kai Kara-France, I think he's got to fight a more perfect fight to beat Albazi. He's got to fight a more perfect fight, whereas Albazi doesn't. Albazi's got more ways to win. He's always going to be dangerous. And I think he's even going to be very much in the point battle, even if it's purely on the feet. So Albazi's the pick. I'm going with him at minus 120. That is my bet. You can bet on him to win by finish, plus 165, which I think is more likely for him to get a finish. I'll throw a sprinkle or two on that, but really my only bet so far is his money line. I put it in parlays. I just really trust him here. We'll see how the fight goes, but enjoy it. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit. Check out my other videos.